All right, take two. Thanks, everybody. I was still speaking on the other Zoom and was losing people, and I thought maybe it was something I had said, but it was a different Zoom link. So we are here as the HHS committee, specifically to discuss Bill 2021. I want to thank everybody on this call. Our last session was a very meaty and important one and ran a little late. And so we are going to discuss this bill. We're joined by Clark Beal, Senior Administrator from DHHS, and Mr. Kenneth Welch from the Environmental Health Manager from DHHS. And our central staff on this was Ms. McCartney Green. Ladine did a great job, as usual, in preparing this packet. I will now yield to colleagues, both Council members Katz and Rice, who were the two co-lead sponsors for this bill, to provide a little bit of context and background. And I'll start with you, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and we appreciate the committee listening to this today. And I believe this topic will not be quite as long as your previous topic. Just call me someone that can predict some things. But we and Councilmember Rice as well, I'd like to thank him for all of his assistance on this. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can because of the hour, but as you know, the goal of the legislation is to ease the burden on an industry struggling due to COVID-19 restrictions while maintaining the safety, which is very important, of our residents. The bill will align the county with the state statute and our jurisdictional neighbors. Some of my colleagues may remember that the council enacted similar legislation related to hotel swimming pools in 2017, and we appreciate hearing from residents who've raised important questions related to accessibility, sanitation, and staffing, and we look forward to working through those issues today. I'd like to thank Councilmember Rice and his staff for their partnership, and Ms. McCartney Green for her research and thorough packet. And the one question about the education side, I certainly haven't talked to Councilmember Rice about it, but I certainly believe that that's a logical and reasonable something that should be added. I believe that we can never get too much education on this topic or many, many others. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will yield back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. Councilmember Rice.
Yeah, I don't have much to add beyond that. Just the understanding that this provides options. And I want to be very clear about that. This is not a mandate that no health club will ever have a lifeguard. It provides options to some because of the nature of their clientele may decide that they need to have that and need to have a lifeguard present because of the busyness of their pools. But there are others, and they may do it at certain times, but those are options that should be set for those particular entities to be able to establish. What we shouldn't do is mandate that it has to be all the time during those operating hours, understanding that things are very different. You know, many of you know I go to LA Fitness all the time in downtown Crown, and there are classes that are being held and there are lifeguards that are present, but there are other times when that pool is empty. I know I'm there for hours and see it. And, you know, it's a waste of money at that point to have someone there. And so if they could have a better flexibility in terms of being able to schedule when they want to and choose to have that there, but they still have others. I know all the managers there at the LA Fitness. And so I know that there are many that are certified in terms of life-saving techniques and AEDs and other safety devices are there. So I always feel safe when I'm there. I don't utilize the pool, but I know plenty of people who do. And so from that perspective, I think that we can achieve the best of both worlds. As you heard from Councilmember Katz, ensuring that we promote the safety of our residents, but at the same time, understanding that businesses are still continuing to struggle as they try and recover from COVID-19. But in addition, this is something that we are seeing across the state that is different. And so Montgomery County has an economic disadvantage for health clubs that are in Montgomery County because of the requirements that we have in place as well. And so I think putting us in line with where our other cohorts are across the state makes complete sense while still maintaining the safety of the individuals that go there. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you both for providing that context. Ms. McCartney-Green, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through the packet.
Thank you, Chair Albanos, and welcoming also our guests, Clark Beal and Kenneth Welch, and also Andrea Mansfield, who's also from LA Fitness, who's here to answer any specific questions. So happy to be here to walk you through the packet. One of the things I wanted to start with is just the terms, what would be implemented under Bill 2021. So specifically, this bill would define the term health club. In the county code, health club is defined, but it includes yoga, dance facilities. This is specifically for clubs that are going to be muscle toning, weight loss, so a specific definition for that. And what that actually does is it defines it to about 11 health clubs in the county that would classify right now under that code. So with that being said, those 11 clubs, and obviously there might be more moving forward if there are other fitness clubs that decide to have a facility here. To meet the certain exemption to have the lifeguard removed, they would have to have a certain pool size. So current state law does not have a lifeguard requirement for the pool size under 2,500 square feet. They've left the other terms up to local jurisdictions to implement stringent more guidelines. Montgomery County is one of those counties that does have a stringent guidelines of requiring a lifeguard if the pool is under 2,500 square feet. So what this would do, obviously, is provide an exemption for those small pools. This does not apply to larger pools. This does not apply to pools that have swimming lessons or community pools. This is specifically for the health clubs. So with that being said, at the health club, if you're under a certain size, and if you have members or guests that are the age of 16 or older, so this does not apply for children or other adolescents below that age. You have to be a member of at least age 16 or older. We checked with LA Fitness and some other clubs, and the current research shows that that is already the requirement. That 16 is already what most, if not all, of the health clubs, that 11 of them that would apply, that's already a standard. So this is nothing different or new. In addition to that, obviously with the removing of the lifeguard, signage would be required. Certain signage, swim at your own risk, have to be a certain age. And so that's still required for our hotels, which has a limited exemption, and the same applicability would be for fitness health club pools as well. In addition, the bill would require the facilities to have an emergency alert system that connects to a 911 if there is an incident, and to be able to administer CPR or gain some other aid as well. That's required for hotels and will also be required for the fitness clubs as well. And then one of the things that throughout our research with council staff and talking with HHS, we've realized that with the removal of the lifeguard, that there's still a responsibility for the facility to have an employee to inspect the pool area, just for safety, to make sure that obviously that it's still operating in a safe manner. And just one of the things to clarify also is that the county still requires a pool operator to be on premises at all times. So the pool operator may be a lifeguard, but does not have to be. But the pool operator is there and is responsible to be able to be inspecting the property as well. Pool operators are certified. They do a little bit of training, and I think HHS can probably speak more to that. But in all totality, those are the 6 or 5 main goals, obviously, that the bill prescribes. As I mentioned, Montgomery County is the only jurisdiction, and we do have originally Baltimore County and Anne Arundel previously had in place a requirement for lifeguards for health club pools. Since 2018, they have removed those safeguards there. So I can stop there. That's just specifics of the bill. I can go into a little bit more details, but want to just stop there and see if there's any questions related to the bill specifics.
I don't have specific questions, more just some general comments. When I first read the bill, obviously as the former director of the recreation department who managed a lot of swimming pools, the definition of health club is really important. And by the way, as you were describing that, Ladine, I suddenly felt the urge to do some push-ups. But I would just say that, this checks the reasonable barometer for me, because obviously, we are talking about, while drownings are the leading cause of deaths among children under the age of 5, you have to be 16 in order to be able to access these pools. And, all of us have traveled and have been to other parts of the country that have these small pools that we're talking about and describing here, with similar provisions. And so I think in keeping in line with other local jurisdictions, it is reasonable for us to keep in line with other local jurisdictions. I think the signage is important. I don't know that it has to be a mandate, but with over 42% of our county residents speaking English as a second language or a second language, I think having some provision that there be multiple languages in that signage would be beneficial. So I don't know if that has to be formally within the law or preference. I'm open to either, because we're talking about a small universe of health clubs that this would be impacted by. But that was something that stuck out for me and I'd be open to, and then, would love to hear our lead co-sponsors' perspectives on. But so those are just some of my general thoughts or comments. But I do think, Mr. Beal, from your perspective and DHHS's perspective, would love to just hear some comments or thoughts. And I do want to acknowledge the great work that your team does. We have literally hundreds of pools here in the county, not just the large ones operated by the county and the municipalities, but many community pools that DHHS is responsible for overseeing as well, which can be an arduous task at the beginning of each pool season. So I want to give a lot of credit to you and your team, because I know how responsive you are personally, but would love to just hear your perspective generally on this bill, and if you have any thoughts of your own with regards to this issue.
Thank you. We've worked for several months now with Ms. Green, reviewing this bill, trying to identify any problems or gaps that might crop up unexpectedly. And we feel comfortable with this as it is. We've had experience with the hotels. It was several years ago when our laws were modified to give an exemption to hotels. There's not been any problems. I'm not aware of any drownings that have occurred as a result of the change to the law with hotels. And as you said, with the age limit of 16, we're comfortable with moving ahead with this. Ken, do you have any other comments or thoughts on this?
No, I think you summarized it pretty eloquently. The only thing that I would like to add is that, majority of these health clubs are self-managed, meaning they don't have a management company that oversees it. Like LA Fitness does have a management company. They're one of the few where they have professional pool operators there on site and manage the pool. And talking with other jurisdictions, Baltimore County and Prince George's and Anne Arundel, their only concern was there was overall some water quality issues at these pools when the lifeguards weren't present because they weren't adequately checking the proper pH and chlorine in the pools when necessary and making the adjustments. But besides that, I think that we're pretty okay with the bill as written.
Great. I know Councilmember Glass has a question.
Already unmuted. Thank you to the sponsors for this, I think, common sense piece of legislation. And Chair Albornoz was going in the direction I was. But first, let me say that I, too, go to LA Fitness. But if you see Councilmember Rice and me standing next to each other, you will see that he gets a lot more out of his membership than I. So the question I have is about the signage. And aside from the additional language, which I totally support that, the language that I saw in the bill says, quote, warning, no lifeguard on duty, swim at your own risk. Is that the standard language that is used in these circumstances?
Yes, Councilmember Glass, it is.
Okay. then I think that makes sense. And for people who do utilize the pool at their gyms, swim clubs, fitness centers, clearly this needs to be front and center. And yeah, short of getting into contracts, I would presume, or we're legislating here, so I shouldn't presume, it needs to be explicit and upfront in that membership sign up. And so I don't know if that is codified or if that is left to a best practice from the fitness club themselves, but just so that there's no buyer beware, so that people understand what they're engaging in when they sign up for that gym membership. Okay, that's all I got.
Okay, Councilmember Rice.
So I just wanted to say that all the points that you raised, I think, are great. I think that multiple languages, let me just be very clear, I'm very in agreement with that. I'm also in agreement with what Councilmember Glass said. If we, and I know this may seem a bit onerous, but to my colleague and friend who's representing LA Fitness, but some sort of disclosure, just letting people know that, we don't have lifeguards, and again, it would be that it would be up to the individual company, because some may still have them. Keep in mind, this isn't a restriction on lifeguards. It's just saying that you don't have to have them, but you can. And so if you don't have them, disclosure of that would be something. So I don't know, Ludine, if that makes sense in terms of what I'm describing, but I mean, it seems very simple in terms of just a line saying that if, health club chooses not to, then they need to just disclose that to its members, however that may be. And I think that Councilmember Glass may satisfy what your concern was, that I agree with.
Yeah, and so during the pandemic, I stopped going to the gym like so many other people did, and didn't have a membership, and did some online classes, yoga and otherwise. But when I rejoined with LA Fitness just a few weeks ago, quite frankly, in speaking with the manager, going through all those processes, I think at that point in time, that point of sale, quite frankly, that would be the good time to share the information.
That's a reasonable.
Yeah, sorry, Ms. McCartney-Green.
No, that's fine. And I think that's a reasonable request for us to be able to amend and make that a requirement as well. The Maryland Attorney General also has a health club unit that monitors the contracts and the agreements of some of these as well. So I think that's doable for us to be able to amend the bill to put that in there.
Councilmember Katz, are you good with that?
Yeah, I am good with both. I'm good with the signage, and I'm good with the contract language. I do believe, and I don't know how often, and really, if I ever want to visit with Councilmember Glass or Councilmember Rice, I'll stop by LA Fitness to say hello to you. I don't know how often a person would sign a new contract, because obviously someone that has already joined LA Fitness would not have signed the contract that says, oh, by the way, there's new legislation here. So I don't know that we should say that everybody has to sign a new contract, but if the language could say that if it's a new contract, that language would be included, I think is certainly reasonable. Thank you.
And with regards to language, we want to be reasonable about that too. It can be something like the top 3 languages spoken. There's some consistency there with other government services. So Ladine, there's probably something we can track and mirror, because we don't want to have, I think there's something like 100 different languages spoken in MCPS. So something reasonable for the LA Fitness and the other purveyors of these pools to be able to comply with. Is what I'm looking for. Maybe a top 3 or top 4.
Okay, will do.
Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Mansfield had her hand up, was trying to comment.
Oh, yes, Ms. Mansfield. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to comment or not, but I feel like I should probably say something. But at risk of screwing things up, maybe I shouldn't say something.
Ms. Mansfield, just really quick, your audio is, there's something going on with your audio. It's very difficult to understand you. It sounds a little garbled.
Okay.
You should partly pun, but it sounds like you're underwater. Can't.
Okay. Is that a little bit better?
Yes, perfect.
Better? Okay, good. Sorry. I just had to change my setting really quickly. Yes. Well, first, thank you very much. appreciate the conversation. Of course, I can only speak on behalf of my client, Fitness International and LA Fitness. I'm feeling like, I think disclosing that information, I don't believe they would have a concern with that at all. I can't see why they would not put it into their contracts, and members that are already belong, just making sure they're aware of that, and with the signage that will be displayed, I think that would also clearly let members know that lifeguards are not on duty. I know in my conversations, I know the additional training requirements are not a concern or an issue for them either. So I don't know if you had any additional questions, but I do know they have reached out to the individuals within Montgomery County that are responsible for installing the emergency phone systems and so forth. So they are having those conversations, and they will be in place in all of their clubs. But I'd be happy to answer any other specific questions.
Great. Go ahead, Councilmember Rice.
I just wanted to make sure that it was disclosed that, and I can speak for Councilmember Glass because I know in his case as well, that while we both attend LA Fitness, we actually pay the exact same monthly rate as every single public person who goes to LA Fitness does. In fact, I actually pay more now than I did pre-COVID. The county actually had an agreement with Fitness Way, and that went away. Unfortunately, Fitness Way, who's the contract company that the county uses, no longer has an employee discount price with LA Fitness. So I actually pay more to go to LA Fitness than I would other health clubs. So just wanted to disclose that.
You can, yeah, I was gonna, absolutely. I am now feeling like I should probably join either that gym or some other gym, because like Councilmember Glass, I discontinued at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's a great thing overall, health and wellness, and it's important. All right, so maybe Ms. McCartney Green, if you can work on those amendments. I don't think we need another session on this. I think what I'd like to propose is that we move this legislation out of committee with those amendments, acknowledging the specifics of those amendments won't be disclosed, but we've got the flavor of them enough, I think, to advance this to full council at least. So could someone make a motion, please?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All right, without objection then, I think this is unanimous. Yep. All right, so thank you all so much. Appreciate the feedback, and thank you so much for joining us, Councilmember Katz. And this session is now adjourned. Have a great lunch, everyone, and go to the gym.